Greetings to everyone around the world. We are in the middle of Sagadawa, the auspicious month. So let's begin this session with a brief meditation to set our intention in the right state. So with that brief mindfulness session, to wish that this session be beneficial to both oneself and others, I want to welcome Klaus. Really great honor and pleasure to have you with us, because you are a real scholar authority on Buddha nature, and we have been having this event, this forum, to exchange ideas, to stimulate thoughts on Buddha nature, to promote the concept, the whole sort of ethos of Buddha nature, in order to also help the world have some sort of positive thinking, to help the world explore sort of meaning in life, and sort of see the good nature and the good side of things. So it's really great to have you with us to talk about Buddha nature in the Indo-Tibetan tradition, particularly from the perspective of the work you have done on the Buddha nature sort of proponents from the 14th and the 15th century Tibet. But before we get into the actual conversation, I often ask our guests to share with us your experience of first coming across this idea or this philosophy of Buddha nature, and what kind of impression or memory you have of that encounter.
Well, first of all, hello, everybody, and thank you very much for your kind words, Markus Peermann, and for your introduction, Karma Phuntsho. It's a great honor to be here and to be able to share my research and also my kind of preliminary experience in this format. And yeah, it's well, interesting, you know, like when I was thinking about, you know, like how it all started, it all happened in the year 1984, when I started to study Tibetology and Indology at the University of Bonn. And the Kamalashila Institute was not very far. And so I had a chance to study a lot with traditional masters. And they visited the Kamalashila Institute very frequently. And I mean, it was the Dakpo, of course, you know, which was studied very much. We had the Butön by Khenpo Tsulten Gyamtso. And so that was my first encounter with Buddha nature. And you all probably are familiar with the Dakpo, and it starts by, well, the course is that you have a Buddha nature, and then, you know, like, okay, you meet a spiritual friend and you set out on the path, and like, and I thought, well, that's great, you know, like, I mean, I have a Buddha in me, or at least a potential to become a Buddha, and now, like, I meet the masters, you know, from Tibet and from the exile in India, and now, you know, like, there's a community, and I can just embark on the path. And so that was somehow the beginning. And the 80s in the Kamalashila Institute, I mean, that was a really active time. I mean, there were just one high Rinpoche coming after the other and giving very precious teachings, and like not only philosophical teachings, but there were a lot of empowerments. I mean, like a few weeks, you know, like after I had first visited Kamalashila Institute, Kalu Rinpoche was giving a Kalachakra empowerment, and, you know, and then shortly after, Tenga Rinpoche came and gave a lot of teachings and the tantric empowerment. And it all somehow linked very well with this kind of teaching of Buddha nature, because like the tantric teachings are such powerful means, you know, to grant you a direct access to this Buddha nature and give you a glimpse, at least, of what Buddha nature feels like. Or so that was a very nice start in a way. And it was very precious also because at that time, like, academic studies in Buddhism were not so strong and not so well informed. And even though like the philological training was very good, like teaching Sanskrit and Tibetan and all that, and it gave a very strong foundation. But, as for the understanding of the teaching, it was a nice opportunity, a good opportunity for me to complement my academic studies with traditional teaching and traditional upbringing, so to say. So that was basically how it started. And I mean, there's a very long story about it. And but I somehow ended up, like working on, maybe I can just say that I happened to discover Lotsawa Shenupel's extensive commentary on the Gyur Lama in the private library of Chetsang Rinpoche in India. And then, I got another copy that was a handwritten copy. Then I got a Parma or a block print from Dzogchen Penlop Rinpoche. And based on that, I could like prepare a critical edition, and I could translate the major parts of it and study Lotsawa. And that's how I got interested in the 14th and 15th century. And I compared Lotsawa with other masters of this time.
Fascinating. Really amazing. I particularly find the powerful statement of Gampopa, the cause is Buddha nature. I think it's extremely influential and very powerful.
Yeah, exactly.
And then Lotsawa's commentary, which I actually have discovered only recently, is probably the longest commentary on the ultimate continuum, Gyur Lama. It's so extensive. And we'll come to that later. But now you ended up working on these 14th, 15th century masters who had a lot to say on Buddha nature. And Buddha nature, obviously, is such a complex topic when you go into these commentaries. So in order to understand Buddha nature, especially for our audience who may not be all familiar with this, you have kindly shared a handout. So I'd like you to give your understanding of Buddha nature using this handout, so that people can follow the discussions we will have about different interpretations as we proceed. So let me share the screen first. Let me know.
Perfect. So I just like give you a short summary of the major doctrinal developments in India, because you understand much better the discussion on the topic of Buddha nature in the 14th and 15th century when you have these small pieces of information just in front of you. So if you can just download it, or like we will put it up later on the website, or you just have a look. I will go in a few minutes through that. And I start with a group of sutras where Buddha nature is fully equated with ultimate truth and the Dharmakaya, like the Anunatva Apurna. And now I don't see the handout anymore.
Hold on. Sorry.
Now it's back. Yeah.
Good. Sorry.
There is a Sri Maladevi Sutra in the Kanshur. It equates Buddha nature with the Dharmakaya, even the Dharmakaya, like which is free from stains. So like it's a full equation of Buddha nature with the Buddha. That means, like we are already fully developed Buddhas in our within, and we simply don't know it. We are just obstructed by adventitious stains, and there is no growth of qualities or something. And we already have all Buddha qualities fully developed. I mean, that's what a number of sutras say. Like also Mahaparinirvana, Mahasutra, and the Sri Maladevi, the Anunatva, and they say that this Dharmakaya with which the Buddha nature is equated is permanent, it's blissful, it's the Atman, it's pure. So like when you're a little bit like familiar with Buddhist philosophy, well, you might like sense that there is a problem, that you like call the ultimate or Buddha nature or Dharmakaya an Atman. And like there were quite a few other like mainstream Indian Buddhists who had problems with that. And so we find in other sutras and other texts like different approaches or strategies to interpret like this full equation of Buddha nature with a grown Buddha, and in the terms that we have an Atma and everything. And one is the Lankavatara, which equates emptiness with Buddha nature, and the Alaya Vijnana, even though one probably has to say, like, the emptiness in the Lankavatara is not like the emptiness of Chandrakirti, is the great emptiness of ultimate meaning. Then, you know, like another important text is the Mahayana Sangraha. That's now not a sutra anymore, that's a Shastra, like a treatise. And why do I name it here? Well, because it distinguishes here Alaya Vijnana from the enlightenment of the Buddha. So like we have one group like which equates Buddha nature with the Alaya Vijnana, and another one, well, the Mahayana Sangraha doesn't use the word Buddha nature, but it speaks of the enlightenment of the Buddhas. So you could say like it clearly like distinguishes Buddha nature from the Alaya Vijnana. The difference is such that while the Lankavatara somehow says that like there is no difference, it's like Buddha nature and Alaya Vijnana is like the ocean and the waves, you know, like the waves are the water of the ocean. There is no real difference. Like the Mahayana Sangraha would say, no, like the Alaya Vijnana is completely separate from the Buddha. And when you, for example, study and listen and reflect and meditate on the Dharma, the seeds of this positive activity is not stored in your Alaya Vijnana, but it is stored in the Buddha mind, which pervades the whole world and also us sentient beings. So that's a very clear-cut distinction. So that's something you have to remember. And then I just wanted to give you the main like information from the standard Indian treatise on Buddha nature, the Ratnagotravibhaga. And it gives, you know, the three reasons why we have a Buddha nature. Yeah, like first, the Buddha wisdom like is present in all sentient beings. The second reason is the non-duality of stainlessness, which means, you know, like the true nature, the tathāgata, or the emptiness of our mind as an ordinary being is not different from the emptiness of a Buddha. So it's a kind of restriction of this full equation of a Buddha nature in a sentient being with a fully grown Buddha. Like it's only equated on the level of emptiness. So it's like saying, you know, the chair and the table in front of me, they are not different because they are both empty of an own nature. So that's a very like, yeah, restricted form of equation. And then, you know, that's like very important. The third reason is its fruit, I mean, the Buddhahood, has been metaphorically applied to the potential, rather the Buddha nature is the cause here. Upachara, metaphorically applied, can also mean, you know, a manner of speech. So you can translate this sentence also, its fruit is a manner of speech for the potential. So like that means the potential is vaguely called a Buddha, even though the Buddha nature with its inseparable qualities is not yet purified. And then, you know, like that, you can imagine that like some, you know, like prefer, you know, to see like the first interpretation and say like Buddhahood has been metaphorically applied to the potential, and they establish a difference, you know, like between the potential and the fully grown Buddha, whereas others, they insist like upachara means only a manner of speech and stick to the full equation. So like either way, you can interpret the third reason such. Then, you know, like I wanted to show you also another verse from the Ratnagotravibhaga. It goes like, just as all pervading space is not defiled because of its subtle nature, so is this Buddha nature, which is found everywhere in sentient beings. Now, like you find the same sentence again in the Bhagavad Gita, and instead of tata ayam, like this very brackets Buddha nature, you have tat atma. So in the Bhagavad Gita, instead of Buddha nature, you have Atman. So I'm showing you that, you know, like just to indicate how close like the teaching of a Buddha nature, even in the Ratnagotravibhaga, even in India Shastra, is to the non-Buddhist teaching of an Atman. Yeah, and maybe we just go down a little bit. I try to be short now, and well, there is just this like standard like definition of Buddha nature, nothing needs to be removed from it and nothing needs to be added. Yeah. And well, that has been interpreted also in different ways. We will come back to that. And then, like there is this following verses which question, like why did the Buddha teach here Buddha nature exists in all sentient beings, after they taught everywhere that everything should be known to be empty in every respect, like clouds in dreams and illusions and so on. So like here comes the question, how comes, like you have this notion of an ultimate Buddha nature in all sentient beings when it has been already said in the Prajnaparamitas that everything is empty. And that has been interpreted in different ways. And there is like a Madhyamaka tradition which establishes that based on these two verses, Buddha nature is neata, has a provisional meaning. And then you have also Yogācāra hermeneutics, which establishes with their own principles on the basis of the very same verses that Buddha nature teaching has definitive meaning. So like that was my overview. And you can see now, like you have the situation in India such that, well, you can fully equate Buddha nature with a Buddha, like even to the extent that you can say, well, there is a permanence and there is bliss, there is an Atman and everything. But you can also say, well, Buddha nature is only a potential and it naturally grows. You can equate it, you can take it as a synonym with emptiness and align it with Madhyamaka. Then you can also like take the whole Buddha nature teaching as a teaching of provisional meaning, and you can take it, also as a teaching of definitive meaning. And I'm telling you all that because, in fact, like in the 14th and 15th century Tibet, like you find like a master for every possible combination of these. So like when we discuss, like now the different masters of the 14th and 15th century, I think it's quite helpful to have this handout on the side.
Indeed, yes. Thank you. Thank you for sharing this very good overview, and especially all the critical texts that are subject to different interpretations. And I think by bringing in even the Bhagavad Gita verse, you sort of underscore how difficult the philosophy or the concept of Buddha nature is, because there's been so much controversy around it, of it being almost non-Buddhist, sort of eternalistic philosophy on one hand, and then the other saying that this is the ultimate truth that the Buddha taught. So we have this really complex situation of whether we see Buddha nature teachings as you said, provisional teachings or ultimate teachings, as Buddha nature as being absolute real nature in sentient beings with full-blown Buddha qualities, or just the potential to bring about those qualities. So when we look at, I, for instance, as a student, when I want to understand somebody's position on Buddha nature, I often go to these verses and check how they interpreted these verses. Because I think these verses are critical sort of core texts on which they give their commentaries and thereby show their position. So when we look at the 14th century, for instance, Klaus, there are so many authors. It was actually, it's unbelievable that there's so much scholarship, and also most of the highly authoritative Tibetan philosophers and authors on Buddha nature lived in the 14th century, were active in the 14th century, and then also some of them, of course, in 15th century. If you look at, firstly, the 14th century, I don't know if you would have time to even go with all the masters from one of these centuries, but if you look at the people who were active in 14th century, who have you studied and who do you find very sort of persuasive, convincing, and impressive in terms of their interpretation of Buddha nature? I think earlier you cited Longchenpa, and to me, one of the people in the Kagyu tradition following Longchenpa is Rangjung Dorje.
Yeah, exactly. So this was also one of the first masters I, of course, studied, and like the Karmapas and the third and the seventh and the eighth Karmapas. I found them particularly interesting, And then, like, of course, you know, like in the following centuries, there were quite interesting masters also, like in the Rime movement, you know, like Kongtrul Lodritaye and so on. And then, of course, you know, like I got also somehow, yeah, fascinated by the Jonang teaching. So maybe it had to do something with that. My first empowerment was a Jonang Kalachakra empowerment. So I ended up also having a kind of a special relation now with the Jonang path. In fact, we have a research project with the Jonang masters in Amdo since 2019, and we are studying the Kalachakra Tantra and how it is used to support the Shentong view. And so, yeah, of course, Dölpopa and his disciples are very exciting also, you know, in this period. Yeah,
Yeah,
and there was, yeah, yeah.
Sorry. There is I read somewhere that Dölpopa met Rangjung Dorje, and perhaps it is because of that connection that they share.
Yeah, somehow. Yeah. But it is rather that Dölpopa, first of all, was not upholding a Shentong view. It is said that, like, after he met Rangjung Dorje, that he became a Shentong Pa. But there are also other stories, you know, like that it was based on his own experience, you know, like while in Kalachakra retreat, which is also possible in a way, but it's difficult to say. Yeah. In any case, he was the most prominent teacher of Jonang Buddha nature understanding, and it's very interesting and fascinating to study also this approach. Yeah.
But it's also interesting in that the Kalachakra teachings, at least the canonical ones, they don't, do they mention the term tathāgatagarbha? I don't think they do, right? But then
no, they well, I mean, one has to say first, you know, like as when it comes to research, when you research Buddha nature, I mean, there is one thing, you know, like you just look for all the Gyulama commentaries and then you search all like the terms Buddha nature. But, you know, like I soon discovered it doesn't lead you anywhere. I mean, you don't find out very much. And it's sometimes even misleading, you know, like, for example, when you read Dölpopa's Gyulama commentary, and he has written it in a very traditional way, such that the Buddha qualities are produced through the like accumulation of merit. Yeah. And so you're surprised. Well, I mean, he's supposed to say that they primordially exist, you know, and so they should be there. But when you read like his Rijie Nidern, you find a distinction between an ordinary presentation and an extraordinary tantric presentation. So what Dölpopa did, you know, like when he was interpreting a sutra, he was just, you know, like giving the common interpretation of the Gyulama, and the extraordinary Shentong view he disclosed only when he gave tantric teachings. So like to understand and study Dölpopa, like looking at his Gyulama commentary doesn't help at all. So what I'm saying is, you know, like when you study the view of a master on Buddha nature, you have to study his hermeneutics. You have to study his whole system. You see, I mean, the text itself, the Gyulama, it's very simple. You know, like I mean, you know, everybody has a Buddha inside, and you know, like the verses are not so difficult to understand, right? But you know, like for a master, like he's not only to interpret Buddha nature, but he has his whole teaching, you know, like of the three Dhamma chakras. He has the first, the second Dhamma chakra. They're all the Prajnaparamita sutras. They are the Madhyamaka texts. You know, there's Chandrakirti, there's Dharmakirti, there's, you know, like lots of different tenets and philosophical ideas. And if you take like the whole Tenshur as a commentary on the Buddha word, yeah, which every traditional master is doing, then as commentaries on the three Dhamma chakras, then, you know, like you have to organize all these complex different ideas and philosophies in a consistent system of teaching, of doctrine. And that's the challenge, you know, to like identify what is a master up to, you know? Does he prefer Chandrakirti, you know, like, Or, like, is he rather, a follower of Kamalashila? Does he prefer a combination of Yogācāra and Madhyamaka? Or is he like only following Yogācāra, which is not very often in Tibet? I mean, there was Ratnakara Shanti, but, or is he like doing something completely outrageous, like the Jonang Pass, like,
but
just, yeah.
In Dölpopa's case, I suppose his ritual, the mountain Dharma, is the magnum opus on his Shentong or view of other empires, isn't it? It's such a superb, very substantive, amazingly authoritative text. And then he proposes these theories of Madhyamaka in a very drastic way compared to other scholars of his time or before. You think that is done mostly in the context of his understanding of tantras such as Kalachakra?
Like, I think, like Kalachakra is really important. And I started to realize this after working with Jonang masters. And it has different reasons here. One of them is like that, like you have the concept of Adi Buddha, right? So that nicely establishes that all Buddha qualities are primordially existent. Whereas, when you look at the Gyulama, like there are different sets of qualities. You have the qualities of the Dharmakaya, you have the qualities of the form kayas, you have the Swabhavika kaya, different sets. And, like not all of them are said to exist primordially, like some say, well, like the qualities of the 32 qualities of the Dharmakaya, like the 10 strengths and so on, they exist primordially, but not, the like 32 marks of a body and the 80 like secondary marks. And so, but like when you say, well, there's an Adi Buddha, there is a primordial Buddha, there is no more question about this. It just means all qualities are already there, and not only as a potential, but fully there. And then, like you have this concept in the Kalachakra of Tongsuk, and which is often like mistranslated as empty forms. Like when you look at the Sanskrit, it's Shunya Bimba or Shunyata Bimba, and Bimba doesn't mean form, it means reflection. And it's compared to the reflection in a magical divination mirror, and in which a virgin can see, for example, in a supernatural way, a thief or something, and or can do some predictions about the future, or she can help you to trace back some lost items, some magical thing, it's kind of supernatural appearance. So, and the idea is that like once like you have in the Shadanga yoga made all the winds enter the central channel, and the normal perceptions subside, and you don't have any more like visual or anything else, like no subject object duality anymore, and you are doing this also in a dark room, in a munkang, then like you all of a sudden have this like manifestations or reflections of emptiness. And they are not like conceptually created, because normally whenever we see something, it comes from our own Buddha Parikalpa, from our false imagining. But this, they just come from space themselves. And that means, like for the Chonang Pass, that means, like the emptiness or the space, it's full of qualities. And that supports their Shentong view in a very, very nice way. And so I think, like there are reasons for them to follow the Kalachakra.
Yeah, and also the Kalachakra in Tibet has been praised for being so explicit and emphatic in in revealing the innate nature, the
exactly
word performance in it.
Yeah, even though like the Gelugpas, they have a completely different understanding of it, and I'm only saying that you can have also a prasangika interpretation of the Kalachakra, and it also makes perfect sense. Like but like the Chonang Pass, they really, like by taking a lot of passages literally, they have good support in the Kalachakra for their Shentong view. Yeah.
So now when you look at the other stream of Buddha nature thought, living at the same time as contemporaries of Dölpopa, you have Butön almost coming with the same background. Perhaps just difference would be the Kalachakra meditation
Yeah,
or
right.
focusing Kalachakra. And he
So
had a very different interpretation of Buddha nature. How do you understand that?
well,
Butön
I
and
mean, you know, like Butön and together with a number of other scholars who obviously prefer Madhyamaka, like so their main hermeneutic strategy is to follow the second Dharma chakra. So the second Dharma chakra has definitive meaning, and so the third Dharma chakra only has provisional meaning. And you can do that, you know, I have shown you on the handout. So based on the Gyulama, you can prove that, like if you apply Madhyamaka hermeneutics, you can show it as niyata. And for him, you know, it's a kind of easy way out. Yeah, because he simply doesn't try to like rephrase or reinterpret a lot of verses. He doesn't try to explain away the Atman stuff and, you know, like the full equation. And so he simply like leaves everything just as it is. And he said, well, but it's niyata. So it's one way of dealing with it, you know, like, I mean, there are other ways, you know, like of being a Madhyamaka and be more accommodating towards the Gyulama. And maybe I should talk about that also, or
no, please, yes, please share how.
Okay, so like you see, like there's like Noloden Sherab. He's a very important figure. He lived in the second half of the 11th century. He was a translator also of the Gyulama into Tibetan, and he had written a Döden summary of the Gyulama. And studying that is quite enlightening. And like he, for example, says that Buddha nature is just a non-implying negation. It's a kind of emptiness. And but you know, like it differs a little bit from the Gelug understanding. He says, well, it's beyond the reach of the intellect. You know, it cannot be like grasped, so to say. But you know, like basically, it's a negation. It's a Madhyamaka negation, and or if you want to have it in a simple way, he just equates it with emptiness. And like just to give you an example, what he does, like you have this verse, you know, like nothing needs to be added, you know, to the Buddha nature, and nothing needs to be removed. So he says nothing needs to be added to the cause of Buddha nature. It just fits in a small syllable, you know, in his commentary, and he changes the meaning completely. You know, like the cause of Buddha nature would be emptiness of mind. So you concentrate, you meditate on the emptiness of mind, and then, you know, like the qualities, they come as if called, as if summoned, you know. So by meditating on the nature of mind, which is emptiness, and the fact that the mind is empty by nature and can be changed, so to say, because it is empty, the qualities just come, you know, together with this realization of mind's emptiness. So the qualities are created, but he interprets, you know, this verse, nothing needs to be removed and nothing needs to be added, such that, you know, like you don't need to add anything to the cause of Buddha nature. You don't need to add anything to emptiness. Your mind has always been empty throughout beginningless time. Yeah, nothing needs to be added to that. And that's all you need, you know, because your mind is empty. You can meditate on it, and you can create the qualities. And the adventitious stains, they have never existed in the first place. So there's nothing to be removed. So you see, like this is what Noloden Sherab does. And because he's having this kind of more complicated or sophisticated interpretation, he can claim that the Buddha nature teaching has definitive meaning. And so, you know, like, and this is somehow also an approach you can find again in the Gelug interpretation. There is a commentary on the lecture Ningpo by Gungtang Champeyang, and like he explains, you know, like this two verses which point out a contradiction between Buddha nature and Prajnaparamita. Of course, you know, they first of all directly point out a kind of problem, yeah, because there's a contradiction. But indirectly, yeah, that's what Gungtang Champeyang says. Like it also implies that if Buddha nature teaching is the same as the Prajna Paramita teaching, there would be the fault of redundancy. So if Buddha nature is just emptiness, then why to repeat the teaching? Why to say it again? Well, and then the answer would be, well, we have to teach emptiness again, making use of the word Buddha nature, in order to counteract the five faults, which are to be discouraged and so on. So people might be discouraged and lose hope. So you tell them, well, there's a Buddha inside you, so please practice, there is hope for you. So in order to counter these faults, you teach emptiness by making use of the word Buddha nature. And because Buddha nature is understood as a synonym for emptiness, you can say that the Buddha nature teaching has definitive meaning. So that's the two main approaches by those who take Buddha nature as a synonym of emptiness, or who explain away Buddha nature as a provisional teaching.
But Klaus, even in the case of mainstream Gelupas, starting with Tsongkhapa, wouldn't they identify Buddha nature with emptiness, that is non-implicative negation, and then that emptiness is considered as an ultimate truth, isn't it, as nitartha? Whereas they may issue that claims that qualities of Buddha are in you already, that particular teaching may be nyartha or provisional, but Buddha nature is empty.
But what they basically say is, if you study the Gyulama, it's teaching that Buddha nature is the mind empty of an inherently existing mind. And by meditating on this non-implicative negation, the qualities just appear. So they follow somehow Nolud and Sherab and say, well, this is how we understand the Gyulama. So if you want, it's not taking the Gyulama anymore literally. And then, if you reinterpret the Gyulama as Nolud and Sherab is doing it, then you can call it definitive meaning. I mean, the result is the same, either, you just take it literally and say it's niyata, or you reinterpret it and then you say it's nitata. So the effect is that you don't accept Buddha nature, right? Yeah.
It's almost 40 minutes past our conversation. Let's see if there are any questions from the audience. If there's anyone who has a question, Marcus, any questions on Facebook?
Not many questions yet. We have one question on Facebook coming in. So I encourage anyone who would like to ask a question to do so on the Q&A function on Zoom. But from Facebook, we see one question. Is Buddha nature actually explainable, or is it an experience-based understanding? Does our dualistic mind have the capacity to understand Buddha nature correctly?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And usually, one has to say well, it's in the realm of experience. I mean, there is Asanga's commentary as an introduction to the verses which I just quoted on the handout. And it says, what is the purpose of teaching Buddha nature? If even 10th level bodhisattvas cannot fully grasp it. Yeah, so if it's even difficult for those who will be a Buddha very soon, so why teach it? And that shows that it's really a kind of teaching very difficult to grasp. And it can be only assessed directly in a way, and or it is given as a teaching to encourage people. Yeah. So even though you are not at the moment able to directly experience your Buddha nature, but just to reassure you, you know, like don't worry, you know, you have this Buddha in you, and there will be a result, you know, if you practice the path. But then, you know, like the Buddha nature teaching becomes more accessible, like in Mahamudrā or in Dzogchen or in Tantra, when you get like a privileged access to the true nature, either through formal tantric empowerment, yeah, or through a kind of mind-to-mind transmission, yeah, and that's something this is a specialty of the Kagyu teachings, so to say. But it's definitely something else than the intellectual understanding of absence of inherent existence, or like when you're doing inferences and you're using logic to establish that things are empty of an inherent nature. This is not the same experiential sphere than the direct access. And Lotsawa, we had no chance up to now to talk about Lotsawa, but
yeah, we'll come to that.
He is he is doing that, you know, like he says, well, you know, like there is this kind of direct access to Buddha nature, and he calls it Rangtong, so kind of awareness emptiness. And he inherits this tradition from Maitripa, and he quotes again and again Maitripa, and so that's, by the way, also why I got very much interested in Maitripa. And as a follow-up project after my Buddha nature project, I studied Maitripa because it's giving a kind of possibility of direct access to this Buddha nature, because I exactly had the same question, you know, so what is the point if it is not accessible? Why should I worry, you know, like so like I got interested in means, you know, to access. I was started to get interested in these shortcuts, you know, to cut through into the Buddha nature. And Maitripa he says, you know, like the phenomena are luminous as experienced in Yata Bhuta Samadhi, in the Samadhi which realizes reality as it truly is. So yeah, you can analyze like the phenomena as being empty, as non-arising, and so on, but you can experience them also like as luminous by nature. And so the difference is such, like there is a kind of practical thing also to it. Let's say you experience pain, you know, you go to a dentist and you have some painful experiences. Now the ordinary sutra approach would be, well, you analyze the emptiness of the pain, and you just think, oh, like it arises from causes and conditions, it has no inherent existence, and after some time it will go away again. When the causes and conditions are not there anymore, then the pain will also go away. I mean, that's one way of dealing with the situation. But Maitripa, you know, like he would just say, okay, I just experienced directly the luminous nature of the pain. And this way, you know, like you experience the pain as something blissful or as something. So you can directly experience, you know, like the qualities of the Dharmakaya, yeah, which are blissful and so on. And even though Maitripa doesn't use very much the term Buddha nature, but he gives very much the doctrinal basis for it. And by the way, also, like Maitripa is said to have rediscovered the Gyulama. And Lotsawa says that, like, because, you know, like Maitripa got the Mahamudrā realizations through the Mahasiddha Shavaripa, he brought this doctrine of the Gyulama to life. You know, he like really made the Gyulama shine forth. And that means, you know, like he is kind of experiencing what he's teaching. So like Buddha nature is taught in a way that you can have direct access to it.
Yeah, perhaps also to respond to that question, it'd be good to know that there are two sort of general lineages associated with Buddha nature studies in Tibet. One that's more sort of exegetical or scholarly, and the other that is more experiential and meditative. And if you look at the scholarly tradition, then obviously some interpret it as a potential for Buddhahood, as an emptiness. And in those cases, I suppose you could claim that you can have first the conceptual understanding and then gradually have the direct experience. But in the experiential lineage, both among the Kadampas and Kagyupas, there seems to be some focus on the direct experience of Buddha nature. And Lotsawa, who you have studied so well, he seemed to bring together these two components, or these
Definitely,
two. He's both analytical and also very experiential. He quotes Gampopa, he quotes Dampa Sangye, he quotes Digung Chamgyön. So is that a unique feature of his among the Buddha nature authors? I mean, you have studied him. If you can talk a bit more.
Yeah, sure. Well, it's Lotsawa was a kind of unique, that's for sure. And one thing is that, like historically speaking, like he just lived in a time when the Yuan dynasty, after the Yuan dynasty, lost its power, and the Sakya, could not suppress anymore, the other schools in Tibet. And the thing is that the Sakya Pandita and other Sakyapas, they have criticized the Kagyu school very much. And they have criticized Kagyu Mahamudrā for teaching Chinese Buddhism, Chinese Dzogchen, and it has no Indian roots, and you can have Mahamudrā only after empowerment and Kyerim and Tsokrim creation and completion stage practice. And to teach Mahamudrā the way you do, like you Kagyus do, has no Indian roots. And now Lotsawa was one of the first scholars, Kagyu scholars, who responded to this critique. And he embedded this critique in his Gyulama commentary. And that's one thing, And so he had an agenda, and the agenda was to show that there is Sutra Mahamudrā. You can practice Mahamudrā, this kind of direct approach to your true nature of mind, based on the sutras. And he reads, Mahamudrā teachings into the Gyulama. So he weaves, Mahamudrā together with the Gyulama, with the Buddha nature teaching. And that makes his commentary unique in a way. Of course, it has also other aspects. It has also the analytic approach and everything. But this direct approach, you find basically only in Lotsawa. And then in the works of the masters, he quotes, when you go back to Maitripa and his disciples. And by the way, I'm going to bring out soon a new book on Maitripa in the lives of the masters, and you can very nicely read that. Then you
Congratulations.
can, yeah, and you can just see, that from a very early level on, you can work with his direct experiences. And Lotsawa gives also some doctrinal support. So what he says is, according to the Vairochana Abhisambodhi Tantra, there are some kind of provisional path. You have the path of accumulation, the path of preparation, and the path of seeing, and so on. And normally you can have a direct non-conceptual access to the true nature only from the first bodhisattva level onwards. But the Vairochana Abhisambodhi Tantra says, well, but they are kind of preliminary, a path. And you can have a kind of provisional path of seeing already well below, on the path of accumulation. And so he argues, he quotes different passages which show that you can work already with direct access to the Buddha nature right from the beginning as a practitioner. And that makes it very special in a way.
Yeah, and I think we have touched on people working or who have been advocating other emptiness. We've touched also on scholars advocating self-emptiness, on direct experience of Buddha nature through the Kagyu tradition. Another tradition and scholar of this period is Longchenpa, who is one would also say had advocated direct experience of Buddha nature and Buddha nature's connection to Dzogchen, isn't it?
Yeah, right. By the way, Rangjung Dorje also, you can see a Dzogchen influence in his writings.
Yes.
And in his Sabmonangidön, he has this kind of Rigpa, and the nature of mind. And he speaks of Novo and Drangshin, and and you can see terminology from Dzogchen has entered also his teachings. And well, in the case of Longchen Rabchampa, it's what I did. I carefully studied the Tumta Tse. It's one of the collections, the treasures written by Longchen Rabchampa. He wrote so much, so but this text is very interesting and very telling about his strategy. And he gives the sutra approaches, the tenets of the sutras. He goes through Vaibhashika, Sautrantika, and then Yogācāra and Madhyamaka. And first, when you read this text, you find that particular Dzogchen terms like Rigpa or Charshi, the ground which of manifestation and so on, or Ying, the sphere, they are equated with terminology of the Yogācāra, for example, the Yongdrop, or other terms, they are equated with Dzogchen terminology. And then there is one big chapter on the practice of the Mahayana, the non-tantric Mahayana. And there he basically gives a commentary on the Gyū-lama. And, again, when he teaches the Gyū-lama, he weaves in terminology from the Dzogchen into Gyū-lama commentaries. And then, when he teaches Dzogchen, then he goes back to and he brings in again, the Gyū-lama terminology. And people have already accepted that the terms mean the same. And then he gets a doctrinal support for his Dzogchen view on the basis of the Gyū-lama. So Buddha nature theory is very important for him. And he did also a few tricks which you may not recognize if you're not careful. He says, for example, that the qualities, the Buddha qualities, are Lüntrop, spontaneously present. But the Gyū-lama doesn't say that. It just says that the Buddha activity is Lüntrop. So, he's a little bit, I'm not saying cheating, but,
But
so
I suppose Lüntrop in the Dzogchen context has a slightly different connotation compared to the Lüntrop that's used in the Gyū-lama.
Probably.
Perhaps.
Yeah, that's what I...
More about spontaneous.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I mean, that's basically what I said, of course, I don't want to, it's only when I analyze, I can see that, well, there are some scholars, who just really carefully distinguish sutra from tantra. And when they are on the sutra level, they avoid any kind of tantric connotation. But Longchen Rabchampa was kind of bringing these two together and introducing.
Let's take another question.
Yeah.
Sure. There's several more questions.
Yeah.
Here's another question from Christian Shire. Hi, Christian. Why is Buddha nature considered as a bridge between sutra and tantra? Is it because of its emphasis on bringing the fruit on the path?
Yeah, that's also a very good question. I thank you very much for that, because it allows me to elaborate on a few other aspects of tantric practice. When you do the completion stage, and then the kind of experience you get, based on the Buddha nature teaching, it feels like you relax into something which has always been there. This blissful state and luminous and spacious state is a kind of your nature, and you relax into it, and it doesn't feel like it's something created from scratch. And I think this is a very important aspect to tantric practice, to have that. And also, when it comes to creation stage, when you create or generate the visualization of the deity, then, you know, like if you like take the deity as a manifestation of Buddha nature, I think, you know, the generation stage practice becomes more powerful this way, because, you know, like you just like let something happen which is already there anyway. So it just manifests. You just have to give it a little bit of concentration and it works. Whereas, you know, like when like the mandalas and the deities and everything, they are just purely created, you know, like as some Madhyamakas would have it, then like it's a different tantric practice, I would say. I mean, and I think, you know, like at least in the Kagyu tradition and Nyingma and Jonang, this is something very important for Tantra. But I have to admit also that like you can, of course, you know, like practice Tantra and have a tantric theory without Buddha nature ideas. I mean, it of course works also with Prasangika Madhyamaka. You just have like dependent origination and emptiness. That's all you need. And all the means, you know, all the mandalas and the bliss and everything, the chakras, they are just part of this dependent arising, and, you know, like a kind of useful visualization, which helps, you know, like to create certain states of mind, like with the help of which you can easily realize emptiness. So it, you know, like when you read like a Gelug interpretation or commentary on tantric practice, it also makes perfect sense. And I don't want to denigrate that. It's only that, like, as a follower of Kagyu tradition, I just appreciate, you know, like Buddha nature being a bridge between Sutra and Tantra. And like I appreciate like to have my tantric experience backed up by Buddha nature teaching. Yeah.
Shall we take the next question?
Yeah, sure. There's also a question more about the Rime Masters. So this person says, thanks for this fascinating conversation, Klaus-Dieter. Could you please say something about how those discourses on Buddha nature in the 14th and 15th century have influenced debates about the relationship between the second and third turnings of the Wheel of Dharma of the Rime Masters in the 19th century? So how did they... Yeah.
Good question, very good. And it definitely has a great impact on what happened in Eastern Tibet. And we had in the IETS conference in Paris a panel on Buddha, on Rime, and we are publishing now with Sprill soon a volume. It will come out in September, and like we have a few papers on that. And now, like in what happens in Rime is that like you have different groups, so to say, you know, like you have on the one hand, you know, like you have the like Sakya, Nyingma, and Kagyu in the Darge kingdom, like with Tsongkhapa Khyentse, Kongtrul Lodro Taye, and Chokcho Lingpa, and they basically follow like yeah, the like taking the third Dharma chakra like as Nitata, and also the second, you know, like as Nitata, but that requires to reinterpret a little bit Chandrakirti, but you know, then you have this kind of second and third Dharma chakra as Nitata, and you can accommodate also like Shentong teachings. And but you know, like what I discovered is that the way, you know, like Shentong was taught by the Kagyu and by the Nyingma at this time, not all were teaching, of course, Shentong, but the ones who taught, it differs a little bit from the Jonang Shentong. Like but still, they were kind of accommodating the Jonang path. There were close relations between Pelpung Monastery and Samtang in Amdo. Like the lamas were traveling backward and forward, and they knew each other. They got empowerments and teachings from each other, and somehow the Jonang paths were like kind of taken into the Rime movement. And but still, there are some subtle differences in the way Shentong is explained. I mean, like this kind of ultimate, which is beyond space and time, and which is like outside of dependent arising, that was something unique to the Jonang path. And that like distinction between relative and absolute truth, you know, like Dölpopa said, it's like two opposite kingdoms, you know, they are not, they are two separate things, relative and absolute truth. And the absolute truth is beyond space and time. It's empty of everything relative. So this is not the way Shentong was explained, for example, by the 7th or the 8th Karmapa, or by Kongtrul, or by also Shakya Chokden. Like for them, you know, like it's rather that, like you have in Buddha nature, you have like relative and absolute truth, you know, like it, and like, but the relative truth in Buddha nature is a kind of pure relative truth. It's the Namtrangi Döndam also sometimes. It's the, yeah, how you say in English normally, it's the kind of expressible ultimate, and so like that would be like, or you could also say it's a kind of the pure appearance as such, you know, like without misinterpreting it as subject-object duality. So it's just the pure appearance as such, Nangtong Yerme, so to say, the emptiness and appearance as such, and like, but that's relative truth, and that's still part of dependent arising. And you know, like it's empty of the adventitious stains. That's the imagined nature, and like to some extent also that includes ultimately that which produces the imagined nature, which is the false imagining. But the false imagining is only like transformed in a process of base or fundamental transformation, ashraya parivritti. So like such that the mind, you know, stops being projecting false things and becomes non-conceptual wisdom. And that's like this kind of extended ultimate, which accommodates also a kind of pure relative, which accommodates also dependent arising. That's the basis of negation. And that's empty of other. So like you could say, like, yeah, the like both, you know, the Buddha nature and the adventitious stains, they're both Rangtong, yeah. But Buddha nature is empty of adventitious stains, of something else. The adventitious stains, they don't belong to the Buddha nature. And so that's why Buddha nature is empty of the adventitious stains. But it doesn't mean that Buddha nature has an inherent existence, or like, or exists in terms of its own right necessarily. There is also this view, but like there were different types of Shentong. Yeah. One is that like that the Gakshi, the basis of negation, includes also a kind of pure relative, and the other one would be that Gakshi and Gakcha, like the basis of negation and that which is to be negated, are both Rangtong, but the Shentong relationship is only between the luminous nature of mind, or the Buddha nature, and the adventitious stains. And but you know, like in Rime, they downplayed a little bit these differences, you know, they, because like they helped each other as a kind of opposition to the Ganden Potrang, to the like to the followers of Chantakirti, and they were not really getting along very well. But you know, there were also other Nyingmapas in the so-called Gemang movement, and they like had a kind of Rime understanding between the some of the Gelugpas and Dzogchen masters. That was also a very important aspect of Rime. So you had different groups, and like the Chonampas, you know, themselves, they had their own connections to the Gelugpas also. So and there is a Tsago Geshe, for example, from Amdo. He went to Trepung monastery, or like and he got a Geshe degree actually. And so like after he came back, you know, like he wrote texts, and he knew very well like all the Gelug interpretation, analytical approach, like to Madhyamaka and the third Dhammachakra, and he presented like everything like with the scholarship of a Gelug Geshe, but then, you know, like but in a way that it could be used as a stepping stone to his Shentong understanding. And like when he comes to ultimate truth, he is 100% Dölpopa. He like just presents the Chonang doctrine as Taranata and Dölpopa. But you know, like as a stepping stone to his Chonang understanding, like he is using Gelug scholarship. And he was a very respected Kalachakra master. And the Gelugpas, they came to his Kalachakra retreat to get completion stage instructions on Kalachakra. And very high-ranking Gelugpas, they took tantric teachings from him. And also now, you know, like I was told that in Amdo, like north of Tsamtang, where the center of the Chonang Pass is, there is Labrang, you know, these big Gelug monasteries. And they say like sometimes like geshes or lamas from Labrang, they come to get the completion stage instructions on Kalachakra from the Chonang Pass. So, you know, like it's not like one thing, you know, Rime. It's very complex. And there have been lots of different interactions.
Yeah, I mean, one of the features of Rime, from how I see it, is that they had that strong sense of inclusivism, isn't it?
Yeah.
That what we had presented from the 14th and 15th century, we have these different interpretations, some that focus and emphasize more of the emptiness part, others of the appearance part, and then that gets passed down and further sort of entrenched into sectarian views. And the Rime movement sort of reacts to that to bring about a more reconciliatory approach, having a very inclusivistic view. And I think it also is really their doxographical thinking of how they don't necessarily see one specific school as the highest and the most ultimate. In fact, most of the Rime masters probably worked in the framework of the 9 yanas. So Prasangika is way down there and not the sort of most ultimate that can't be interpreted. Yeah, and then, as you pointed out, this bifurcation of the ultimate into non-notational, notational, the relative into pure relative, and worldly or impure relative. I think they use these hermeneutical tools to bring together differing sort of interpretations from the 14th and 15th century onwards. So
yeah, it's a continuation. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Dagmar. I noticed the question was from Dagmar, who is also in North America at the moment.
Yeah.
So, Carl, as we approach towards the end of our conversation, I want to ask you, if the audience wants to read a book or follow an author, who would you recommend would be the most impressive author to read, or which title would be, or titles would be books you would recommend? Of course, in addition to the online web resource that we have built through the Sarda Foundation.
Well, if you manage to read Seifert React, but unfortunately it's in French, but it's #1 scholarship, and you know, like it gives you a very good summary of Gyaltsab Che and of Butön, and then, you know, like well, Takasaki like is giving, you know, like a very good introduction into the Gyulama, into the Ratnagotravibhaga. He has a critical, like English annotated translation. Then, you know, like well, there is Kasu Kano, but you have these books all on your like list already, isn't it? And
yes, the books are there listed on the website. Some of them may be even available, especially the primary sources.
Yeah, right. And there is also like the book by Higgins and Rashik and Buddha Nature Reconsidered. And then, you know, like in the book I brought out with Michael Sheehy, with Sunny, there's a lot of Buddha nature also.
The other emptiness.
The other emptiness, exactly. Yeah, and then, you know, like my book on like Lotsawa, the direct path. Yeah, this is also like, if you are interested, you know, like in Lotsawa, that's the main source, but it has also a summary of Rangjung Dorje and other masters of his time. Yeah, and then yeah, what else can I recommend? I mean, there are so many books out these days, and but you know, like if I can recommend you, like start by studying like the tathāgatagarbha Sutra and the Ratnagotravibhaga with a good English translation. And there are so many out now already, and you have them on your list, you know, like anyway. And then, you know, like then you get the idea like like the basic Indian texts.
Mm.
And then, you know, like if you are interested in how they have been interpreted by different masters, maybe you don't necessarily like read anymore like a Gyulama commentary. I mean, that's not so much rewarding. It's better to somehow read, you know, like a kind of scholastic work, you know, like, for example, like Tsongkhapa's like Lekshe Ningpo, yeah, like the distinction between Neyata and Nitata. It's a very rewarding text, like, and you can gain much more insight, you know, like into the Gelug idea of Buddha nature than reading a Gelug commentary on the Gyulama.
Yes, thank you. That's a whole library you're commending. Anyway, at least for the Ratnagotravibhaga, people can go to buddhanature.org and you'll find there the root verses in 5 different languages. So I hope
fantastic. Yeah, right.
And my final question to you, Klaus, before we close, has your study and your sort of research, Buddha nature, shaped your outlook on life, how you view yourself and existence?
Yeah, well, I mean, it definitely has, you know, like in very practical ways, you know, like just by I got support from the German government for doing research on Buddha nature, things like that. So that changed, you know, like some practical aspects also of my life. So such that I could basically spend all my day, you know, like on reading these texts and like pondering these questions. And yeah, and then, you know, like I think, you know, like it supports like practice. You always think, you know, like it's useless to study so much, but I can really tell you that like it helps to support your whatever practice you do, you know, like, even if it is not meditating on Buddha nature, if it is just a Yidam practice or whatever, it supports it. And I'm really like, it's nice that I had the opportunity in my life, you know, to dedicate so many years in studying this material. And also, you know, like that, like it's nice, you know, to look at discussions and different views, different angles, because, you know, like it opens up your mind, you know, you don't become a dogmatic. Then, you know, like say, okay, you know, like it's a nice idea to have all qualities already in you and you just have to recognize them. It's easy. But then, oh, there are others, you know, who say, oh, be careful, you know, you have to step along a gradual path, and it's not, don't take everything for granted. And then you think, maybe they are right, you know, maybe, you know, like there is something to it, you know, like you have to investigate this also, you know, and it's good to look at like the subject matter from different angles and become also tolerant in a way, to different approaches. And at some point, maybe you can see like different interpretations of Buddha nature, just, you know, like give you different approaches and to more or less the same thing. Of course, no, like you cannot say that like it's the same thing to say Buddha nature is primordially present or it has to be produced, but you know, like the practical like implications, like they somehow, you know, like you have certain periods in your practice where you are more like you're making more effort, or, you know, like you try to create some like more concentration or whatever, and then there are some like phases in your life and your practice where you more relax into Mahamudrā or something, you know. So it's nice to kind of switch backward and forward from one to the other. And
I was just about to let you go. Sorry, I was just about to let you go, but there is a question that has popped up.
Okay,
somebody, do you want to take that question?
Yeah, why not? Yeah.
So the question is from Simon. To get from present condition to Buddhahood, even if we accept Buddha nature as being inherent Buddha qualities, practice to develop realization is still essential. The sun is still covered by the clouds and the clouds still needs to be parted. So in this regard, the tradition seems basically the same. Good
Yes.
clause, speak about it.
Definitely. But if the sun has always been there, there's a chance that there's a short gap in the clouds, and a shortcut might open up. Yeah, but right.
Well, thank you very much, Klaus. It was a great pleasure to have you. It's certainly not fair to have you share all your lifelong learning in 1 hour and 20 minutes, and also to try to cover 2 centuries of Buddha nature scholarship involving maybe some 30 to 40 authors. So we hope we'll be able to bring you back again, that you will join us again in the future to discuss maybe the 15th century in more detail, maybe the 16th century. So
yeah, that would be fantastic. Yeah, right.
yeah.
Well, thank you again for having invited me and having given me a chance to present and share my research. Yeah, that was fantastic. Yeah, thanks for your attention and your interest.
Thank you very, very much. And thank you, audience, wherever you are on the world. Have a wonderful day or night. So
okay. Goodbye.